Before we start, I just want to give a quick disclaimer. I just noticed that I have a stain on my shirt, like right around here. So we're just gonna ignore that. Thanks. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Larki and today I am back with another true crime video. Today's case is one that is over 2 decades old and has yet to be solved. This year actually marks the 25th anniversary of this case, and today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit. Jodi was born on June 5th, 1968 in Long Prairie, Minnesota. She was the youngest daughter of Maurice and Jane Huisentruit. Her family and friends described her as a ray of sunshine. She was like a cup of joe in the morning. She was very smart and bright. She was very personable. She would talk to anyone that she would come across, and it would be like they were her best friend. Because of this, her family actually worried that she might have been too trusting and that she let people in too quickly. In high school, she was part of the golf team and she helped them win 2 state championships. Jodi was the type of person that knew what she wanted to do early on. When she was in high school, she knew that she wanted to go into journalism so she could become a reporter. She had dreams of being on a national TV show, and this is what she pursued when she went to St. Cloud State University, where she majored in mass communication and journalism. She was actually the lead in the school's TV station while she attended. After college, she got a job at KGAN in Cedar Rapids, Iowa as the station's bureau chief. After this, she moved back to Minnesota where she worked at KSAX in Alexandria, and then in 1993 she moved to Mason City, Iowa to become the morning and news anchor at KIMT. Jodi was at a point in her life where she was really living her life to the fullest. She loved dancing and loved going out with her friends. She was a social butterfly, so she was always into any opportunity to socialize. Just before her disappearance, she actually gifted herself a brand new car, and it was a 1995 Mazda Miata. And that brings us to Jodi's disappearance. Jodi was set to arrive to the station for work between 3:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. in order to get ready for her morning show, Daybreak, which began at 6 a.m. On June 27th, 1995, Jodi hadn't made it to work at her usual call time. A producer, Amy Coons, called her at about 4:10 a.m. and this is when they confirmed that she had overslept. Jodi had told Amy that she would get herself together and she would make it to the station right away. Just before 6 a.m., when Jodi still hadn't showed up, Amy had to step in and fill in for her on her show. It was an hour-long broadcast, so at about 7 a.m., when there were no signs of Jodi, Amy and some of the other producers from KIMT called the police in order for them to perform a wellness check on Jodi. The police arrived at Jodi's apartment complex at about 7:13, where they saw signs of a struggle around her car. Her car was only a few feet away from her front door, but they did find a pair of red women's dress shoes, a blow dryer, a bottle of hairspray, her car keys bent on the floor, and earrings scattered beside her car. They also found drag marks around her car. Upon finding this evidence, the search for Jodi began immediately. Officers searched the park, which was right next to Jodi's apartment complex. They also searched along the Winnebago River, which ran through the park. Being that Jodi was very well known in the area for being on the local news show, her disappearance gained a lot of attention quickly. On June 28th, agents from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation and the FBI had joined the Mason City Police Department in the search. On June 29th, they actually found that Jodi had reported an incident of stalking sometime in October of 1994. She was out jogging and a van had followed her. She was able to get away, but this has shaken her up a bit, so she had reported it, but there had been no other stalking incidents since. On July 1st, the Mason City Police Chief had officially stated that the case was being treated as an abduction. Witnesses had come forward saying that they heard screams between 4 and 5 a.m. and a white van was seen driving around the parking lot on the day of Jodi's disappearance. On July 6th, a martial arts instructor in Mason City came forward and said that Jodi had taken one of his self-defense classes. He said that she had told him that she had been worried about a previous stalking incident, and that's why she had taken interest in the course. By the end of July, investigators received over 700 tips and interviewed 800 people, but had no leads and no solid suspects. Being that there was so little evidence in the case, investigators believed that whoever was involved in Jodi's abduction had to have been familiar with her schedules. They decided to look into the days leading up to Jodi's disappearance to see if they could find any sort of information or any clues into what happened. The weekend before her disappearance, Jodi and her friend Annie Cruz spent the weekend with Jodi's friend John Van Sice in Iowa City, boating and water ski. John Van Sice was someone Jodi had recently befriended. He was about 20 years older than her, and she had been spending quite a bit of time with him before her disappearance. She got back to Mason City on Sunday, June 25th, where she had time to unwind, respond to some mail, and still be up early for work the next day. On Monday, June 26th, Jodi was prepared to have a long day at work. She went along with her normal morning routine, anchoring Daybreak, but she did not anchor the afternoon show because she was participating in a golf fundraising event with her boss for the Mason City Chamber of Commerce. And although this was a work commitment, Jodi was very happy to be a part of it since golfing was one of her passions. Jodi left the golfing tournament at around 8 p.m. and then headed over to John Van Sys's home to view some videotapes of a birthday party he had thrown her earlier that month. It's not clear how long she was at his home, but we do know that she was back at her house by 10 p.m. that night. Now let's get into some of the persons of interest in this case. The first one being John Van Sys. John and Jodi had met in the fall of 1994 when John had moved from Iowa City to Mason City and moved into the same apartment complex as Jodi, where they met soon after. Many people close to Jodi were very skeptical of their relationship, being that John was over 20 years older than Jodi. In John's own words, he described the relationship dynamic to be that of a father-daughter bond, and he grew to be very protective of her. However, some people close to Jodi believe that he was romantically interested in her. He was very possessive of her in public, and he even named a boat after her. Before her disappearance, John threw Jodi a surprise party where he invited all of her friends. He would also invite her on weekend trips to go water skiing. On the day of Jodi's disappearance, John inserted himself in the middle of the investigation. He arrived at Jodi's apartment where he immediately told police that he was the last person to see Jodi, being that she had visited him the night before to view those videotapes. Although this might seem a little strange, John did have an alibi for the time of Jodi's disappearance. A friend of John's, LaDonna Woodford, said that she had called John at 6 a.m. to confirm their morning walk. She can confirm that he was home because this was 1995 and people didn't have cell phones, so she called him at his landline and he obviously had to be home in order to answer. If this is true, it only gives John about a 90-minute window to abduct Jodi and make it back home by 6. Police had John take a polygraph test shortly after Jodi's disappearance, which he passed. In the years following the disappearance, John has refused to do any media interviews and has moved to Arizona to start a new life. In March of 2017, the Mason City Police Department filed for a search warrant for GPS data on 2 vehicles belonging to John. The results of this have not been made public, and the search warrant has been sealed until September of this year. The second person of interest in Jodi's case is a man by the name of Tony Jackson. Tony Jackson became a person of interest after journalist Carolyn Lowe and retired police officer Jay Alberio started looking into Jodi's case and possible suspects. Jackson is a serial rapist who is currently serving a life sentence in Minnesota State Penitentiary for raping 3 women in 1997. Lowe and Alberio found that Jackson was living in Mason City at the time of Jodi's disappearance, and he was living just 2 blocks away from the KIMT station where Jodi worked. Jackson also had a violent history. His ex-girlfriend said that he would often have violent outbursts, which was one of the main reasons for their breakup. They actually broke up just 5 days before Jodi's disappearance. Lowe and Alberio sent a huge file with all the information on Jackson to the Mason City Police Department, but they never seriously looked into him. Again, this case has very little evidence. The suspect pool is not that big, and very little details and new information has come to light in the years following the disappearance. Some people have criticized the way that police handled some aspects of Jodi's disappearance. The first being Tony Jackson as a person of interest. There was a 48 Hours episode on Jodi's disappearance which aired in 2018. In the episode, it actually shows how Lowe and Alberio attempted to contact the Mason City Police Department and see if they had gotten any new information on Tony Jackson and what they had found on him. Once they got in contact with the police department, they had the file just collecting dust, so they never seriously looked into him. A second aspect to consider was that the crime scene or the area around Jodi's car was never fully taped off and people were allowed to just walk through it, which is how people like John Van Sys were able to just walk up to police on the day of Jodi's disappearance. A third point was that Jodi's car was held as evidence for only a few months. I've seen other cases where the few pieces of evidence that police do have, they keep in their custody for as long as they possibly can. Now, with a case that happened in 1995, you would think that police would hold on to every single piece of evidence in hopes that scientific updates would allow allow them to run new tests to see if they can find more information or come up with DNA profiles or anything that would come to light in the 25 years since her disappearance. And that's pretty much all of the evidence that we have on Jodi's case. She was declared legally dead in May of 2001 in order for her family to handle her estate, but since then there have been no new updates and no new information has surfaced. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.